Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Linemiller, your host. Thank you to our sponsor, Farm to Plate. They are creating tomorrow's food business ecosystem today, and you can find out more at farmtoplate.io. We are across the world today with Fern Ho. She is co-founder and CEO, or CEO and co-founder, the dual role at the Leaf Protein Company. Fern, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. No matter how you say it, you do a lot there, pretty much at the Leaf Protein Company. But tell me about Leaf Protein. I guess I've heard about all different protein sources. It's a hot topic these days, looking for alternatives to traditional meat. But Leaf Protein, I haven't heard very much about. Why don't you educate us what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So believe it or not, leaf protein is the most abundant source of protein on Earth. It's actually been researched for many, many decades. And what we're talking about specifically is the protein enzyme called rubisco. So rubisco is used by plants in their leaves to photosynthesize. And as you can imagine, pretty much all plants photosynthesize to survive. And so if you think logically through that, it really is the most abundant source of protein on Earth, and it has been scientifically measured to be so. And I guess was sort of the genesis of our startup, the Leaf Protein Co.
Wow, and I have not heard of Rubisco before I spoke with you, and I think it's just exciting to be able to get this information and education out to our listening audience. How did you even start down this path of alternative protein?
Yeah, what a great question. I probably couldn't imagine myself doing this maybe 5 years ago. But I guess as an adult, I sort of developed a lot of food intolerances around dairy and gluten intolerance. And so I was just becoming personally more aware about the ingredients that were going into our food, particularly our packaged and processed foods, which, line all our supermarket shelves. And I was one of those people, because of those intolerances, having to look at the ingredient list at the back of these packets to see, well, what's actually in there? And the more I looked, the sort of scarier it became, because there were a whole host of unrecognizable ingredients, numbers. And the more I read about it, the more I started to understand that there's such a connection between the provenance of the ingredients that go into our processed and packaged foods. And there's link also with the sustainability and biodiversity of our ingredients. And so when I was introduced or found out about leaf protein as the most abundant source of protein on Earth that can be found in all these edible leaves across the world, it sort of made me wonder, well, why hasn't this been commercialized? And particularly with my product management, product marketing background, I sort of felt that there was a real commercial market opportunity for this. And that's kind of how, we started the Leaf Protein Co. back in September 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right in the middle, towards the beginning, actually, of the pandemic that we didn't know was towards the beginning, but it has ended up to be an earlier time frame. So who is we starting the Leaf Protein Co.?
Yeah. So I had an original founder that I worked with, and he was the one actually that really introduced me to the concept of leaf protein being the most abundant source of protein. And we'd seen like a lot of research done about it. There had been a lot of lab scale type extractions to demonstrate that it is feasible to extract this edible protein. But neither of us really had the food science background or the scientific research background to really progress that extraction and optimization of it for commercial type execution. And so I then met my now co-founder, Connor Bolfany, in about middle of 2021. And it was kind of serendipitous because, as I mentioned, we'd started Leaf Protein towards the end of 2020. So, we had our website up, and the next year I had Connor reach out through our website, and he was working on his PhD, extracting leaf protein as his PhD from a very unusual plant, saltbush, which in Australia is one of the native plants that actually can help with regenerating degraded soil. So it was really unusual that someone from the US reached out about leaf protein extraction using saltbush as their plant source. And so we started talking, and it really seemed like the perfect fit with his food science research background, and then me with the product management commercial side, for us to really come together and make the Leaf Protein Co. work as our startup.
Yeah, that's exciting and serendipitous, like you said. Thank goodness you had a website up and some information, and he could find you so that you could join together, because it sounds like there's quite a bit of science involved in figuring out like the best way to extract and how to make the Rubisco usable. And can you tell us a little bit about some of the process that you're going through?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it's been known in the scientific community for many decades that there does exist this edible protein. The challenge with Rubisco, as I mentioned, it's a protein enzyme. So as an enzyme, it degrades very quickly and very easily through any extraction process, particularly when heat is involved. And so what this has meant in the past, that previous extraction protocols really didn't yield a particularly nice tasting ingredient. It has been used actually for animal feed back in sort of the 60s. But as you can imagine, it might be nutritious, but not very nice tasting, and food manufacturers just wouldn't use it in their food. And so the real challenge for us to bring this to market commercially is how can we gently extract this protein in sufficient quantities that does preserve both the quality of the protein, but then also allows it to be a palatable enough ingredient that can be used in food formulations. And that's really what my co-founder has developed with our extraction protocol.
Wow, that's exciting, because from a human perspective, taste is very, very important. I mean, we're not going to eat I think health foods have struggled because there are so many things that are good for us that don't necessarily sync up with our palate. We think, I just don't want to eat that, and we'll choose something else, even though we know it's not as good for us. So I'm glad that Connor is helping to figure out about bringing the best of the Rubisco out in a way that it's also very palatable for the human to eat.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
or to
yeah.
use as an additive in food, because companies right now, this is a big topic, Fern. I'm sure there are a lot of companies that make products, food products, that are looking for alternative sources of protein.
Yes, they very much are so. And what's really interesting, I'll add really quickly about protein ingredients, is that for the layperson, protein, you think of protein, you get it from meat, and there are plant sources. But actually, from a food manufacturing perspective, protein ingredients also provide a lot of very interesting functionality for some of the new type of plant-based products that are coming out to market. So think of your things like your plant-based milks, your oat milk, your almond milk, and all the different types of nut milks. Also, you have your plant-based meat alternatives. As you said, people ultimately choose what they eat based on taste and nutrition, by and large. And so part of the appeal of a food is with taste is also the texture. And so protein ingredients can actually help to provide some of these really nice mouthfeels in terms of sort of creaminess or a binding type capabilities. And so the amazing thing about Rubisco is that it can act like an egg white replacer, which in many instances can be used as an emulsifier, a foaming agent, gelation even. So it's not just a protein ingredient. It's actually quite a unique ingredient for so many different applications.
It sounds pretty versatile. I didn't realize it had some of those qualities, Fern, to actually add maybe some volume and some different mouthfeel like you were referring to. That's exciting.
Yeah, and we actually demonstrated just last month. So we had a live on-stage demo at the Evoke Agri-Food Conference here in Australia. And yeah, Connor did some demonstrations about the foaming capability that, you could use in different things like meringue, a plant-based milks. And it can start to replace some of those numbers that I talked about at the start that an increasing number of consumers like myself are needing to avoid for health reasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that I enjoy having some milk kind of whipped up, not all the way to whipping cream, but for my coffee, kind of to make a latte. You need to add some air, and the plant-based milks do not do that very well.
No.
So this is hopeful to somebody like me who likes to have a little bit of a latte as a coffee in the morning. That's pretty exciting. I didn't realize that before. So let's talk about what your process is. What do you do? So you've got really plants are in abundance to pull from, but you found one in particular that's very useful for how your process that you have right now.
Yeah, so I think one of the key missions behind the Leaf Protein Co. is really to actually increase the biodiversity of our plant protein sources. And so we are a small startup at the moment. And so, you got to start somewhere with the first plant. And actually today we've done protein extractions from, I think, over 15 different plant sources, all the way from the more unique saltbush type plant through to your horticultural, your standard vegetable crops like broccoli leaves, carrot tops, cabbage, spinach. And now with our pilot plant that we just set up last year in central Queensland, we're working with the local growers there using their existing forage crops. So the big thing about leaf protein commercialization, I guess there are two things to it. The first one is, as you said, the process. A lot of work previously had been done at lab scale, but what the hurdle was, well, how do you scale those lab scale processes into a commercial facility that can produce the tons or hundreds of tons that food manufacturers require? And often something that might work at a smaller scale isn't feasible when it's like, huge scale. So what Connor has developed with our thermomechanical extraction process is that we've used a process that does allow us to scale economically. And so through that, it does mean that we can reach a market price point that can be competitive with many of the existing plant proteins in market today. And so that for us is really key for making this viable and commercially available, obviously. We are constantly looking to work with new growers so that we can, with our roadmap, develop our ingredients from different plant sources. But we have started with some of the local forage crops that are grown in central Queensland.
Right. And considering that's where you are, that makes total sense to be able to maximize the usage of the plants that are readily available where you're starting. So that's exciting. But I'm hearing you talk about, carrot tops and broccoli leaves and maybe some parts of the plants that aren't always used, but they're still good. I mean, you could have a process utilizing those, and the whole, just being good stewards of the resources that we have to use all of the plant is another big movement. I hear that theme a lot, that companies are trying to do that.
That's definitely an angle that we have done a lot of research on with some of our local research partners. One of them is End Food Waste here in Australia. So big call out to the South Australian Research and Development Institution, who we've been working with at looking to valorize these waste side streams of our horticultural systems. So we have actually worked with a big local retailer here in Australia to do a trial to take away the waste, sort of cabbage, lettuce, all of that, and do our extraction to demonstrate that, yes, you can actually extract a more valuable ingredient that can be used for human consumption. Absolutely. So that is a channel, absolutely.
And I hear you saying waste. And for those that are watching on YouTube, you see me doing air quotes around the word as I say waste, because it's not really waste. It's usable plant material that's just not being utilized in the current application, or, whatever it's being sent to. Even if it's a whole cabbage being sent to the grocery store, they take those big outer leaves off normally before they wrap it commercially. And so I want to say it's not really waste, but we can redistribute that somewhere else to be usable. That's all very exciting, Fern. I am thrilled to be able to share the message of the Leaf Protein Co. and what you and Connor are doing there in Australia. And I'm looking forward to having your success there in Australia, and also be able to scale that larger so that you can come to places like the United States, where I am, and to other places in the world where we have listeners.
Yeah, well, we've had interest from global food manufacturers and ingredient suppliers and distributors from day one. I mean, as a startup, you're constantly assessing market interest for your product. And so it was really reassuring and quite exciting, really, that some of the largest ingredient suppliers were so interested in our ingredients. So they've been waiting very, very patiently for us to start to produce our first samples. And now that we have set up our R&D pilot plant in Queensland, with this supply coming in, we're really excited to take the next step. So 2024 is a big year for us.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to following what's going on with you and the Leaf Protein Co. But is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we go today, Fern?
Look, I think the thing that I'd love for the audience to know is that, our food system is not just about us and the human planet, but it's quite a holistic integration of all living things. I don't want to sound too woo-woo here, but the more we are able to increase the biodiversity, the better able that we can have this more sustainable environment that ultimately feeds both the planet and humans. So, it's a win-win all around.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for bringing what you're doing and your innovation in the food space to our audience. And I look forward to hearing more. Thanks for being with us.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And if you like this interview with Fern Ho and hearing about the Leaf Protein Co., let us know. Make a comment, subscribe to our show, and we look forward to bringing you another intriguing guest next week. Until then, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.